When I was working in one of the consulting organizations, my boss told me, "Ooh, you have a very strong personality. Why don't you just act like an Asian woman?" And he said, just don't showcase your personality. Don't be strong. And I had a leadership coach at the time, and she said to me, "Melissa, it's interesting because you hide 99% of yourself at work. You're never going to be happy until you can show up as your authentic self. You're never going to find peace and fulfillment until that occurs."
Welcome to Identity Unveiled. IU is a platform that supports advancement of Asian American women to the executive ranks. We highlight amazing stories of Asian American women becoming the first in their industry or breaking barriers as executives and leaders.
In the United States, women represent about 23% of partners in consulting firms, reflecting the broader underrepresentation in senior leadership. Today's story is about one of these women, with an added element where, despite breaking through glass ceilings, sudden business downturns can lead to layoffs affecting even top executives. Transitioning from high-powered roles to unemployment challenges, identity, and today's guest demonstrates a journey from the corporate peaks to renewed success that highlights the indomitable spirit and serves as powerful examples of survival and reinvention.
Today's guest is Melissa Goldner. Melissa is the founder of Fit for Future, and she worked as a consultant with firms such as Accenture. She's also a vice president at Ogilvy, and then returned to consulting as a partner at Profit. She also became a principal at the management consulting firm Slalom with over 12,000 employees and 49 offices. She's also a member of Chiefs, a private network with the most powerful women executives in the country. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Melissa, let's just dig right in. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Queens, but raised in a town named Garden City in Long Island. The time I grew up, it was a predominantly white community. I was one of the only 3 Asian families, and I'm a Chinese American. My parents are 2 immigrants that came from Hong Kong and Taiwan. And it was a very formative experience because at that time, you know, in Sesame Street, you have like the 3 oranges and the 1 banana, right? And they always say, which one doesn't belong? I really felt that because when I went to school, I didn't look like anybody else. So much so that in my kindergarten class, they decided to put me in English as a second language class. My father, who had graduated the top high school in Hong Kong in 2 years, went to MIT, graduated in 2 years, was a partner at Morgan Stanley at the age of 22, was so embarrassed that his daughter was in a class that might be taking a little bit more time to assimilate than others when I actually knew English. I just didn't speak because I didn't look the same as everybody else. And within the first day of that class, I was in a class with another individual that didn't speak English, and I was teaching her a book in English. So they kicked me out of that class. But ever since then, my family decided that they were going to really focus on assimilating me into the white culture. And I know it's out of love and respect and wanting me to have a chance, but they stopped speaking Chinese at home. As a young child, I think without it being said, I just realized that power was proximity to whiteness. I'm really ashamed to say that I was embarrassed of my Asian culture. And it was only until the last decade or so where I was able to really embrace it as part of my identity and reignite it with pride.
So you went into college, and did you know what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so when I went to college and I got a scholarship for playing the violin. So I was first chair violin during my freshman year of high school. I went to a college in the Virginia area that looked very similar to actually where I was brought up. It was predominantly white, and I remember I was hiding from the Asian group because I didn't want to be associated with the Asian population at the time. And even with violin, when I was in elementary school, I used to walk to elementary school with my grandpa, and we only lived a few blocks, and I used to be made fun of by my fellow students and peers saying that, oh, Melissa with the violin. It's so sad because I was actually very good at it. I started when I was 5 years old. I actually played at Carnegie Hall, but I was so desperate to decouple that from my identity that after college and after it wasn't part of my allowance to be in that university for a discounted rate, I stopped playing. I regret that. What occurred was I actually was bullied. When I was in high school, I was actually raped in high school, and then I was molested by my piano teacher, who was an Asian man. As an Asian, growing up with an Asian culture in a white community is very complex and confusing sometimes because there are those cultural nuances. Ever since I was a kid, I was told, put your head down, respect hierarchy, respect your teachers, respect your elders. Don't say anything if you don't have anything good to say. Didn't say anything about the rape when it first occurred because I was afraid. I'm a daughter of 2 very conservative Christian Chinese Chinese immigrants, and I didn't know if they were going to actually disown me, part of my culture. So it was a very lonely time. Felt like I had to handle it all by myself because I was afraid. I'm very lucky that in college, I actually volunteered at a rape counseling unit for about 3 of the 4 years. Through that, I was able to break that cycle and tell my family after I was healed about the occurrences that happened to me when I was in high school.
Did they respond in a way that was unexpected? Was it they hoping that you had told them back then?
My father was very upset that it happened under his own nose. I was surprised. I didn't know actually how my parents were going to react. My mother didn't react in the way that I thought she would. I wanted her to swoop in and be the mother that I see in Hallmark shows. But in Chinese culture, we actually don't really hug. We don't say I love you. The I love you comes through cooking for the family. It's more acts of service. And for a long time, I didn't understand why I wasn't loved until I realized they had a different language of showing me, even if it wasn't verbal. My mother kind of was silent when I first told her. If you know my mom at all, she won't go on shopping sprees with her daughter. She'll be like, bring your credit card. After I told her, she took me across the street and bought me a $99 lamp that wasn't on sale. And I know that that was her way of showing me, like, I'm sorry, even though she wasn't able to articulate it. In addition to that, I found out later that my mother was also sexually molested by somebody that was older than her in a church setting. When she tried to tell her mother about it, her mother swept it under the rug because there was some shame associated to it. And I think some of those cultural nuances occurred. And I think I was the first person in the generation that actually spoke out about it in a public way.
And I'm glad you did, because it certainly can be a cycle in a family when it becomes a cycle and a pattern in a family. And so I'm glad that you were brave enough to come forward.
When you came out to your parents, how old were you when you told your parents?
It was in college. It was actually after another formative event. When I was a freshman in college, I was playing beer pong and I accidentally broke a gentleman's shot glass. He thought it was funny and labeled me Saigon whore. Apparently came from a Chris Farley movie or something like that. There was an Asian character on it and she was labeled Saigon whore. And I tried to laugh it off, but for some reason it stuck. I went to a very small school. And so unfortunately that nickname spread rampantly throughout the entire campus across all of the sports teams and then other people.
It sounds like high school.
Right, exactly. There were times where people were treating me differently because they thought that the nickname was literal, and they were trying to hook up or something like that. And it all came to a head where I was at the large dining area on this campus, and I was sitting next to the swim team members. They were sitting at two different tables. And when I got up, innocently trying to put my tray away, they started chanting in front of the entire university, Saigon, poor, Saigon, poor. And I remember I fell to the ground and I was just so hopeless. I ended up charging 5 of the swim team members for racist, verbal, sexual harassment. Unfortunately, nothing really happened for the first 4 until I told my family about it, because I was so frustrated that you think when you're growing up, you watch these Disney movies and you hear about the good guys, right? Or the good girls, and they will win at the end. But in real life, I started to realize that wasn't exactly the case. What I found out was that the Division III school was starting to win against Division I. And so the school knew about it, but they try to hide it. So they weren't trying to proactively punish the swim team members. And so that was, Diane, why I ended up in desperation telling my family. When I told the university that I started telling my family, then the last person got charged with some community service at the dining hall.
It almost sounds like a movie where it's just unreal, just what you experienced. How did you move forward?
It's so interesting because I really do firmly believe that the things that happen to you, you have a choice of moving and taking it. It's not going to define who I am, but I'm glad it's occurred. I'm glad that my high school situation occurred with my piano teacher, with the rape, with the Saigon horror situation, because it's created the ability for me to be so empathetic and understanding what really pain feels like, and find this light and fire in me to amplify historically marginalized groups of individuals. I'm so passionate about women's leadership and uplifting those that are beneath you. I am so passionate about, forging a way for others to feel like they have a voice because of it. And I don't think I would be such a do-gooder if I just had an easy life. So I'm actually really appreciative of this. To be honest, I actually forgave the 5 swim team members. And pardon my language, you are going to see assholes no matter where you go. There are assholes in every place that you go. So you might as well go and face it. And when I faced it, the person who started it apologized to me crying, saying that that was the worst thing he's ever done in his life. I ended up becoming best friends with the other three. And then the last one ended up transferring himself. And I'm so glad
So that's incredible, Melissa. I think in such a, like you said, in your formative years, you found the strength within for resilience, which actually led, just for to fast forward, to you becoming a partner at Ogilvy. Matt, tell us a bit more about the transition you had from there to Slalom.
I was at Sloan for about 4.5 years. And at Ogilvy, I was there for about 4.5 years. It was a great experience. I actually started in an employee engagement practice to help run it while the lead was off on maternity leave. I actually didn't know that I had to leave the practice during the interview process because we were all sitting down. And when I first started, within the first day, she got up and goes, "Okay, well, I'm leaving on maternity leave in about a week and a half. You're going to own the practice." And I think the reason why I was so good at it was because I understood people. I'm in organizational psychology. So I focus on org and culture. I sit at the intersection of business strategy and human behavior. And I think the reason why I am so able to accelerate my path to understanding the hearts and motivations and fears of individuals is because I'm a human and went through it too. And then I had a couple of roles at Ogilvy. And one really important one was when I worked for the Global Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. And that's where I started to get exposed to what I couldn't unsee anymore. So I ended up becoming her right-hand woman. I did DEI strategy across the global organization. I sat as a co-lead for the Women's Leadership Network. And then I oversaw the ERG, Employee Resource Group, strategies for all the organizations and the acquisitions that Ogilvy had. And ever since then, I couldn't unsee what I couldn't see. So I ended up being a partner of transformation for the CEO and Global Diversity and Inclusion Office. And I think at that point, I wanted to do it again at scale. At that point, Ogilvy was my only client, right? I was doing it for one organization. And so I was craving, how do I create this impact at scale? And that's when I went.
And that took you to Slalom.
Yes, that took me to Slalom.
So then did you start at Slalom as a partner?
No, I actually went from partner to experienced consultant. I actually almost left when I first started Slalom, if I were to be honest. It was during those times where, do you remember where the big organizations and corporate started to knock down the cubicles and everything was open space? So it was during that time, and we had moved our offices to a place where everything you could see. So everybody in an executive role, when I was at Slalom, there were no women in any executive positions at that organization when I started. And I remember thinking to myself, ooh, I can't unsee what I see anymore from my last experience working for a global chief diversity inclusion officer. And I had this internal struggle. I said, Melissa, are you going to stay and do something about it? Or are you going to go to a place that's more diverse and inclusive? And I said, you know what? I'm going to stay and try to do something about it. And so I created a business case. I met with the HR individuals. I talked to the talent folks to really understand the patterns, how many women we had in the pipeline, the interview pipeline, how many people fell off. I created spreadsheets that showed.
Just to slow you down there, though. So you saw this issue of a lack of women in the executive level roles at your consulting organization. Yes. And you took the initiative to build a business case as to how to get more women in the executive seat. So when you brought this to the organization, to, I guess, HR or whomever, I mean, did you take it to executives?
I took it to the top executives. They were all white men that came from, they were probably 50 to 60 years old, that had either previously come from Accenture. So they were partners, managing directors, the head of the office.
How did they receive that?
So I leveraged my understanding of people. So I realized that many of them were fathers, or, obviously they have mothers, and I hate when people say that, because that doesn't automatically make you a feminist. It doesn't automatically make you wake up in the morning, yawn and stretch and say, gee, how do I help a woman today? Right. So I knew that. Okay.
You're trying to find that connection.
Yes. And I also realized I was a young-ish, Asian female woman, not even the same gender as the individuals in the room, not even the same level. And I was about to faint, but I was like, this is bigger than me, Melissa, this is bigger than you. So I went in there, I turned off the lights, I put up a slide that was black with white words, and it said, what would you like your legacy to be? And I got everyone's attention.
So you present this data to the executive group.
Yes.
I'm fairly certain it was a solid business case. What happened next?
So then I said, do you want to be ahead or do you want to be behind? And they said, we want to be ahead. And each of them raised their hand around the table. I. And I got approval to create a women's sponsorship pilot. Through that pilot, after the first year, it got approved because you could see that the women that were part of that pilot started to get promoted promoted into leadership positions within the organization. Then this model was taken by some of their larger offices across the United States to be able to scale that impact in other slalom offices. When I left the organization, there were about 40 women that went through the program. Every 40 women were either promoted once or twice. And when I left, it was 50% women in executive positions and 50% men.
But let's go back now to you. You went through, I imagine, this program because you became partner at Slalom as well. And somewhere in there, you went and had 2 babies.
Actually, no, I did not become a partner at Slalom. I was a principal. So I was in charge of one of their their first ever global account. I actually left Slalom after my maternity leave. I got an offer to be a partner at the next company when I was on maternity leave on the second to last day of my maternity leave.
So you were second to last day of your maternity leave, you became partner at this other organization. And this was a large management consulting company as well.
Yes, it's a mid-sized management consulting organization focused on growth for organizations. And so they did a lot of brand work, experience design work, org culture, which was the practice in which I was in, as well as marketing. The reason why I joined was actually because I was a mother. I know it sounds so ironic. It was the first time mother, and my daughter was literally rolling around under my desk during the interview. Becoming a partner was something that a mentor once told me, that if you want to be able to accelerate and scale your impact on other individuals, push your foot on the gas pedal. And if you have the leadership and influence, you can break systems, you can redesign processes, you can pull people up, you can make sure the right people are in the room. And I looked at my daughter and I was like, oh, I want her to think, lean into something you're scared of, because they're going to grow no matter what. And I thought to myself, all right, this is time that I have to be, live by example. And so I accepted the offer.
So you're now at Profit from Solomon.
No, I have left Profit.
Okay.
Yes.
And so now so Slalom was the last corporate where you left.
Profit was the last organization.
Profit. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay. And then you had your second kid at Profit.
Yes.
I remember you mentioned somewhere that you were taking 6 months off, and that was a challenge.
It was a challenge in the industry at large. It's really, when you're a partner in most management consulting organizations, you have to hit a certain revenue goal. The first year, I met expectations. The second year, I ended up becoming the highest performing partner globally from a scorecard perspective. And then the last year, I was out on maternity leave, and I wasn't able to catch up of the 6 months that I was gone in pipeline building, because I was out nurturing my second child. And in the culture, that is, a lot of our work is tied to our achievement. In Chinese culture, we're told we need to either be a doctor, a lawyer, or a partner at a consulting company. And I realized through this process that I must have been living somebody else's dream, because when I did come back from maternity leave, it was one of the hardest years of my life. I was facing postpartum depression. I had 2 young children that were sick like 30% of the time. There's not a lot of support and childcare support that you think in 2024 to do this. I don't believe that you could do it all. I think you could do it all at different times in your life. It was very, very hard to keep up with. I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning to get my work done before the kids woke up, then brought the kids to daycare, and then would go into the office, sitting on a chair and not leaving until the end of the day, meeting after meeting after meeting, and then doing it all again. And I was experiencing so much depression and anxiety during that time. I didn't have a voice for myself for some reason. I thought this was being a good mother, bringing in income for the family. This is their college degrees. Like, these are all the things that went through my head. And I'm so appreciative that the layoff occurred, because I think for the majority of my life, I spent it thinking, having pride of how good I was overcoming these traumas, and how good I was overcoming these barriers, or jumping through multiple hoops to get to the next level or something like that. And what I forgot was, how do you even experience joy? And this helped me decouple my worth through what a title is on LinkedIn, through my achievements. And I've actually can say confidently that I have found worth from within, and I've never experienced so much joy. I feel like I have a second shot at life.
You tried to make changes so that more women could get to the top. What needs to happen to get more AAPI women into the partnership level roles?
The reason why Identity Unveiled even happened was because we realized that there weren't enough stories about Asian executives. We couldn't see ourselves in these positions in the past. I think the more people that are able to do this and create representation, women or Asian, right? I think it becomes more of the norm. Just like most employee resource groups, right? I hope that the dream is to not have to exist anymore, to not have to be a minority supporting, to not have to have additional support and resources. But the fundamental truth is not all of us start from the same place in the race. And so some of us have a head start. And so I think it's a combination of those that have a head start pulling people forward. And it doesn't also have to be just Asian women, because I don't think one of the things I have an issue with is that the people that didn't create the problem to begin with are usually tasked organization to fix the problem. That's not helping the problem. We need everyone. And it's not a women problem either. We can't have 50% of a population solve 100% of a problem. We need 100% of the population to help solve the problem.
So and that kind of segues into where you are now. Your founder just started on this entrepreneurial journey and started a company called Fit for Future. Tell us more about that.
Fit for Future came to me because I want to make sure that we are getting a person or organization ready for the future. I think a lot of people are on the hamster wheel and they're not thinking about the power of engaging their people, providing them with the support that they need. That is the reason why I've been in organization and culture, org effectiveness, because in that role and in that seat, we get access to a lot of broken systems. So for instance, even if it's not in a statement of work or a contract, and I see that historically speaking, a process always amplifies the same John Smiths or the people that are the loudest in the room, might we figure out a way to change that process to identify those unsung heroes, those that might not have had, that do have the talent, that do have the experience, but might not have been tapped on the shoulder for. And so I like to inject equity into those systems so that it's a better place for the future. And so I want to do it at scale. What I will do and how I do things differently is that I create systems where you can hear the voices of other individuals within the organization, and so that it can be able to thrive and the people there can be able to thrive when I'm not there anymore.
If you had this company, this company existed for you back in your partner days, what would be the voice that you would bring forth? What would it say?
I think it would be talking actually to like my not partner self, but it'd be talking to my 5-year-old self when I was in the all white community, so desperate to fit in, is that just be. If we can create more systems where people can just be instead of fall into a system that actually doesn't work for all, that would be the advice that I would give myself.
What is your just be?
When I was working in one of the consulting organizations, my boss told me, "Ooh, you have a very strong personality. Why don't you just act like an Asian woman?" He said, just don't showcase your personality. Don't be strong. I had a leadership coach at the time, and she said, it's interesting because you hide 99% of yourself at work. You're never going to be happy until you can show up as your authentic self. You're never going to find peace and fulfillment until that occurs. So what I mean by just be is show up as your authentic self. If you see something wrong, speak up for it. I had one of my biggest regrets when I was a head of HR for an IT and business consulting company was that I was being sexually harassed by this Asian man who was the head of sales, and he was in a revenue generating role whilst I was corporate overhead. So I was so scared to tell anybody about this experience for 4.5 years. And then one of my new groups of new hires, there was an Indian girl who graduated from college, and she had long hair, black hair similar to mine. And he touched her inappropriately and came to my office laughing about it, saying, haha, I inappropriately touched the Indian woman's new hire, thinking it was you. By keeping my mouth shut and not doing what is right, I actually impacted somebody else, and it could have been prevented. Just be is speak out for yourself. As uncomfortable as it is to be telling you both these stories, my experience is it's important to me that I do, because by doing that, I'm hoping that it would create the permission or get rid of and reverse the stigma that has so been correlated with many people's upbringings.
What do you think has been the secret to your success to thrive as a partner all these years? And now you're a partner of your own organization.
I think it's having good role models. My mother being one of them. My mother is an architect. So she was an industry, if you think about it, years and years ago, where it was male dominated. But she was so passionate about it that she went and she did it. She went to Johns Hopkins, I think, and has a certificate from Yale. Someone told me this word, it's called harsha, and it supposedly means like an irony of sorts. So my mother is a harsha to me. So she was actually one of the weakest women I knew, and she's the strongest woman that I know now. And when I say weakest woman, it was that even with her, success at breaking the blue ceiling, if you will, male-dominated industry, when my mother and father were getting a divorce, and she was really struggling so much that she was really depressed. And I remember I was 16 years old. She told me something that didn't feel right. And she said, you have people that will take care of you. I found out later on that her sister had recommended that she go on a weekend trip away to just really heal from the relationship and the divorce and everything that was happening and the pressure that she was putting on herself. And actually, on her way back, she tried to kill herself by driving off the Delaware Bridge. And right before she did, she slammed on the brakes and was like, I'm going to kill my husband before I kill myself. And she found her voice. And I think she was right under 40. And the reason why I tell you this is because I have a real life example of a person that then got out of the relationship, goes, I don't even care what I have out of this. I'm going to figure it out. And now she's winning awards. They closed down Ellis Island for her, like of contributions that she's making in the community. She's an example. She's a CEO of her own business. And she started her business when I started my business. So I think that that's a little really wonderful as part of the story. But when you ask me that, it's having those great mentors. And then it's also having a mindset of and understanding the power of forgiveness. I do not allow any of the perpetrators in my past. I actually consider them as teachers. I have forgiven them, and it is no longer a weight that is on my shoulders. And I'm going to do everything in my power to, I think if a perpetrator won, then I wouldn't be able to love again, right? I wouldn't be able to trust again. And I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm going to love harder than anybody. And that's going to be my story.
We really feel like not only you, but your incredible mentors like your mom before you have gone through so much and have stood their ground. And yet there's so much passion and love, like you said, to give in the future of both of your businesses moving forward. So we're so happy to have you on the show and to hear this incredible story. We're so excited for your future.
Thank you both so much. And thank you so much for having this platform. I mean, you two are both examples of successful women change makers in the world, amplifying voices. It takes one to know two,